Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. So our producer today is Shasta Hensley. She's going to be helping me, and she will be dropping some things in the chat box, the Q&A box. And Shasta, do you want to tell everybody where the Q&A box is?
Yes, it should be up in the right-hand portion of your screen. You're going to see it looks like two little speech bubbles, and one of them is going to have a question mark in it. So anytime that you want to ask a question, you'll ask it through the chat box, and you will push that button. You'll have a little button that says Make Announcements. You'll push that button, and then you put your information in or your question in and hit the, looks like a paper airplane to me, and hit send, and we will see that question. And as Kathy pauses, I will share some of your questions with her, questions that maybe seem like they're more common or that several people are asking. Or you're always welcome, if you don't want to ask a question in the chat, you are always welcome to email Kathy after the presentation with any questions that you have.
That's right. So really appreciate everybody joining us today. If you've got any questions about the presentation today, or you can't find the Q&A box, you could email me. I could check my email over here. I could bring that back up and check it. So everybody, please use that form today. I'll also get a spreadsheet form of who signed in and who left and the times, timestamps and stuff today. So just make sure that you use that form, and then if you can't get in, maybe send me an email. We'll just wait a couple of seconds there just to make sure that everybody's good to go. Shasta, are you seeing anything in the chat box or anything like that?
Yes.
The people in my background, they are working on some lights or something here in the office today.
Yeah, it seems like I have a question from Jamie. She said, have we started speaking? Jamie, can you hear us now, or are you still not hearing us, I wonder? Let me see.
And there is a little gear too up in the right-hand corner. Shasta, you might have to type that in the chat box to say check your little gear, your little tools there in the chat box. That's how you check your sound.
Okay. I'm checking with her to see if she can hear us now. I wonder if others can not hear us. If somebody could let us know in the chat if you can or can, well, if you can't hear us, then clearly you won't know that I'm asking this question. But if you can hear us, could you let us know that you can?
Jamie says no.
Mm-mm.
Well, I've got my mute's not on.
Neither is mine.
Can anybody hear us? Please let us know if you can hear us. Just say yes. That's still Jamie asking if we've started. Okay, Anonymous can hear. Okay, it'd be better if Anonymous, if whoever you are, if you go back out and come back in and sign as yourself, because I can't give ELA credit or answer email questions if you don't sign in as yourself using your district email. But thank you for letting us know that you can hear, but it's really important that you sign in as yourself if you want attendance credit today. Very important, because I will match up that spreadsheet I get from Microsoft with the form that you send in today to look at the timestamps and stuff. So right, check the little gear looking icon on the screen. It's up in the top right hand corner. Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, I'm going to go ahead and get started then, I think. Let me just find where I'm supposed to be at. So again, thank you for joining us today. Hope that you guys are having a good day. We're going to drop some other questions and things over in the Q&A box to make this more kind of engaging, I hope, today. So let's just go ahead and get started then. This is going to be our agenda today. We're going to go over our responsibilities for GT coordinators and GT teachers. We're going to go over the regulations for certification as well as the gifted regulations. We're going to take a glimpse at the GT Coordinator Sample Handbook. We're going to kind of just take a quick look too at the gifted data standards. We're going to look at the rights that you're going to need in Infinite Campus and a few other things that you'll need to get started for the year. Talk a little bit about funding. Also, try to give a short explanation about missing records and data, and then give you some supports and resources to get started for the year. All right, so Shasta, if you would place the other hats link in the Q&A, that would be really good. I know that many of you, besides being the GT coordinator, the GT teacher, you may have other responsibilities in your districts. You may wear the DPP hat or the district assessment coordinator hat. You may be the assistant superintendent. So if you would, please just click that if you would. And I'm gonna look at the form here, bring that form up, hopefully, if I can find that so I can see what all is being posted there. I've forgotten I closed that window myself, so I'm going to have to open it back up so I can see what's being typed in the box there. So, but I know that many of you wear different hats, and it'll be interesting to see what people are putting in that particular form. Got one response here. Somebody has put, looks like special ed. So if you would find that form, oh, there's another person. They have put other, but it doesn't say what the other is. I think it allows you to type in that other box there. Oh, there's some more, another other. So if you have put other, if you would put in the chat box what that means is other, just type in what other roles that you have in the Q&A box. That would be very helpful. So Shasta, are you seeing anything else in the Q&A box? Are people responding there? In the Q&A box, Shasta?
Yeah, I'm checking right now.
I see somebody put technology team.
Mm-hmm.
But I have several people that have put other, and so I don't know what the other is because it's not telling me.
Sherry Collins says that she's an assistant superintendent of academic services. She's the DAC, federal program, school improvement, GT, and instructional supervisor. Oh my goodness.
Well, that's a lot of different things that are going on. Mm-hmm. Yep. Yep. A lot of people. There's somebody that does the sports team. I know I used to help with the cross-country team myself many years ago. So, all right. Very interesting. Got about 8 responses. Shasta, can you see how many people are on our
looks like we have 8. Yeah, we have 18 attendees.
18 attendees. Right, so we've got about half the people have responded.
Mm-hmm.
So please, take the time to answer these questions so that we can see that you're actively engaged and hopefully make it more fun for everybody. All right. Well, we're going to move on ahead then and talk about the responsibilities of the GT coordinator first. So as a GT coordinator, you're going to have several different responsibilities. One of the major responsibilities is being the contact between the state and the district. So you're my contact person. You're the person I'm going to email or call. And so really appreciate you being that person. Also, it's important that you update the KDE school directory if that hasn't been done already. Because that is where people go, parents and other people go to see who the gifted coordinator is for the state sometimes, and if that's not correct, then they're asking for the wrong person. And the way to update that is to contact your WAPOC person. If you're not sure who that is, just email me and I can send you who that person is. Also, it's really important for the gifted coordinator to get with your HR person and update that role for EPSB. They have a role manager that they will update. Another responsibility is to oversee the program and make sure that you're in compliance with the regulations. And of course, you've got to know the regulations in order to be compliant with them. So I'm going to go over those quickly today, or kind of give you a broad overview of that. It's also really important that you make sure that GT staff, certified staff, are hired to provide direct services to students. It's your responsibility to ensure that there is a GT selection and placement committee, either a district committee or maybe one at each school that's in your district for the selection and placement of students for services. It's also important that you understand the data that is being entered into Infinite Campus for the GT program, to make sure that records are entered correctly, that missing records are imported, and that counts are correct for the year. Another responsibility is to make sure that you monitor the gifted service options that students are offered during the school year, to make sure that those are being offered. And if you're coordinating with the regular education teachers in your district, or the fine arts people in your district, or community members, that you're overseeing all of those different services that are being offered to students in the school. As a gifted coordinator, you're also the financial liaison, so you want to make sure that those GT funds are spent correctly, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that later. Also, it's important that you collaborate and communicate with staff. So if I send you emails, it's important that you send those emails on to the appropriate person. Sometimes it might be to your GT teachers. Sometimes it might be to other teachers. If we were to do a webinar on differentiation, that might be something that other teachers in your district might want to take advantage of. Or there may be some Infinite Campus types of training that might come along, or information that your cases contacts need to be aware of. Or there might be some different things that your either building administrators or your central office administrators need to be aware of. So very important to be that communication link between myself, the state, and you in the district. Also, it's important that you oversee the professional development that's for the staff. That's GT staff, as well as all the other general education staff, elementary, middle, and high school. We'll talk a little bit more about that later, about professional development. But it's very important that you also oversee the program evaluation. That's a component of the regulation, where you're collecting data and analyzing the data, making surveys to survey the stakeholders in the district, and also making future plans based on your data analysis and the feedback from stakeholders. And finally, it's your responsibility to submit the reports. There'll be a summative evaluation, and there'll be some other end-of-year reports that you'll be responsible for, and we'll talk more about those later on. Okay, so as a GT teacher, first of all, you've got to have the correct certification, and we'll talk some more about that in a little bit. And we'll talk about how the GT teacher and the GT coordinator can make sure that they have the correct certification, because that's part of the regulation that you have to be correctly certified. Also, if you're the GT teacher, this is something the coordinator needs to know as well, is that 75% of the GT state grant must be used to hire the GT certified staff. And of course, you're the person who's going to provide direct instructional services to identify students, and we'll talk a little bit about that a little bit more too. And also, it's important to know that each student needs to be offered a minimum of 2 service options per the category that they're identified for. And those service options are decided by the GT Selection and Placement Committee. And then there'll be other duties assigned by the district supervisor. For example, when I was the GT teacher in my district, it was my job to enter the records of the GT students in my district, and to keep up with their paperwork and also their progress reports and gifted student service plans. That was part of, my other duties assigned by my supervisor. All right, so I have asked you several different questions. So let's just pause and just see if there's anybody that has any questions.
Kathy, we have a question. Participants are wondering if they will get a copy of the PowerPoint.
Yes, I will be sending you a copy of the PowerPoint, and there'll also be an email telling you where to find the recorded event as well. Are there any other questions coming in? And just looking back at, our other question about other hats that people wear, someone looks like that they teach biology as well as the GT coordinator and the GT teacher. Okay, half a day. All right. You see anything else, Miss Shasta, as far as questions?
Scrolling down here to make sure. Doesn't. Oh, one just came on in here. Let me check it.
Okay.
My screen is being a little wonky at the moment. Let me see what it says here. Oh, it's just a thank you from Sherry. So awesome.
All right. All right. Well, if you have any other questions, we'll be pausing during the training to try to address those. All right, let's move on and talk just a little bit about the certification regulations. And I know that many of you have other certifications, probably besides a gifted certification. So if you would, Shasta, just drop that form and we'll see what other types of certifications people have. They can complete that form and just kind of let us know what else they have worked on over the years. I myself have got a music education certification and a technology endorsement. So sometimes I feel like I'm a jack of all trades and master of none. So don't have any responses. Okay, got it in there. Good. Okay. Don't have any responses yet. Looking for some responses. Hopefully we'll get some responses about the different certifications that people have, because if you wear those hats, usually you've got to have that certification that goes along with them. All right, still waiting for some responses. Still not seeing anything yet. Don't see any responses yet. That's interesting. I wonder why people aren't using the form, or maybe it's just taking them a while to bring up the form. Or if you'd like, you can just use the Q&A box, maybe just to type in other certifications that you have. Maybe that would be easier for people to use. Not seeing anybody with responses yet. Maybe I need to refresh the page. Oh, there's some responses. Okay. So let me just review those results there. So I've got one person that says an ESOL endorsement. Is that English secondary, English as a second language endorsement? Maybe that's what that stands for. Is that what that stands for, Shasta?
I'm thinking it's English speakers of other languages.
Okay. And then someone else has put in there that they have a doctorate of education, superintendent, supervisor instruction, DPP, principal, social studies, middle school and high school. Another person says that they've got instrumental and vocal music, K through 12. I have that as well. I don't have instrumental, I just have vocal. And then another person has put in that they have special education and currently working on an administrative certification. Another person has put that they have elementary teacher, ELA teacher, and consultant. So you guys have been very busy. So we've had 5 people respond. That's good. All right. So good to know that there are other people like myself that have been busy going to school. We'll just go on and talk then about the certification regulations. So if you're the gifted coordinator, this is what 16 KAR 4:010 says. It says, in order to be a gifted education coordinator, you will qualify on the basis below. So you need to have a master's degree or a non-degree fifth-year program, a certificate endorsement for a teacher of gifted education, and 3 years of teaching experience. If you want to apply for the Gifted Education Coordinator certification through EPSB, then you would use code L37 and submit the TC-26 application if you meet those requirements above. Also, someone can serve in this role if they hold the Supervisor of Instruction certification or the Superintendent certification, because this is a district-wide coordinator position, and both administrative certifications include permissions for district-wide coordinator in various programs. If the individual is only serving as a coordinator role, there is no teaching, and there's no teaching of gifted students, they do not need to have the GT endorsement. Now, sometimes people get confused about the difference between supervisor of instruction and instructional leadership. And so instructional leadership certification does not allow you to be appointed as the GT coordinator. That's a building level certification and not a district-wide certification. So that's kind of an important difference there to note, that you need to have, if you don't have the GT certification, the fifth-year program, and the 3 years of teaching, that you can get that gifted education coordinator endorsement, that you can have the supervisor of instruction or the superintendent certification, but that there is a difference between supervisor of instruction and instructional leadership. So I just want to point that out. All right. With the GT teacher certification regulation, this is 16 KAR 2:110. And so this has several sections, and the first section is just saying that this is the definition, that a qualified teacher is someone who holds the appropriate certification as a teacher for gifted education, unless, you know, the superintendent of the employing school district has evidence that you're unsuitable or someone's unsuitable for employment. And then also a teacher for gifted education means a person who works directly with gifted students in addition to the regularly assigned classroom teacher. So that means that it would be a person, it wouldn't be a person, give kind of a non-example here, it wouldn't be a person who teaches, you know, third grade elementary all day long, and then the district offers, you know, some services after school. That's not what that's saying. This is a person who, for example, that person gave the example that they teach biology part of the day and then they work with gifted students the other part of the day. That would be a good example of how that might work. Or it might be a person that all they do is work with gifted students, you know, Monday through Friday during the school year. Also, a person who works with only gifted students for a half day or more must have GT certification. This particular slide is talking about how you have a valid classroom teaching certification certificate. So if you're going to apply for a GT teacher certification, you have to also have a valid classroom teaching a classroom teaching certificate at the elementary school level or the middle grade level or the high school level. And B is not valid at this point right now. That's what we call an unfunded mandate. Right now, the KTIP program has been kind of put on hold for right now because of funding. But it's saying, and then C is saying that you have to complete the appropriate program for GT programs, a GT program certification program. And it's usually about 12 hours to complete that endorsement, and usually there's a hands-on activity at the end, at least there was for me, kind of to show that you've put all those pieces and parts together in order to serve gifted students. This is section 2, subsections 2 and 3. This talks about the endorsement as a teacher for gifted education shall be valid grades through K through 12, and that you would be assigned to a full-time self-contained gifted class. If you're assigned to a full self-contained gifted classroom. This is saying that you have to have that base certificate. So if I wanted to teach like a 4th grade self-contained gifted classroom, I would have to have an elementary base certificate in order to do that. And that the endorsement lasts for as long as the base certificate lasts is what this is saying. And then section 3 or subsection 3 says that a person is employed as a teacher for gifted education has to hold an appropriate endorsement for gifted education, except for, and we're going to talk about this in section 3 of this administration, or if you're a person who has a lifetime certification. And in order to have a lifetime certification, you have to have been certified before July the 1st, 1984. You have to have also taught for 3 years, and you have to have gotten your master's within the first 10 years of beginning your teaching career. All right, this is section 3, subsection 1. And this is saying, let me just look at my notes here. Let me find, okay, the notes here. All right, so the notes here are saying that you can have a probationary endorsement. And in order to have a probationary endorsement, the district has to not be able to have anybody that has a GT certification. And so the superintendent can then apply for this particular probationary endorsement for somebody if that person has a bachelor's degree, a valid Kentucky teaching certificate. You have to be admitted to a preparation program for gifted education for the endorsement, and you have to be currently enrolled in that graduate study program in order to have a probationary endorsement. This is the last section we're going to look at. And so the probationary endorsement has to be submitted to EPSB for that teacher of gifted education. So that's important to see that on your credentials that we're going to look at in just a second. And then also the probationary endorsement is valid for 2 years usually. There are some other pathways that you can take if you don't have the GT certification, or if there's no one in your district that has GT certification. These are some other pathways for hiring someone and being in compliance with the gifted regulation. You can have an emergency certification. This usually lasts for a year. You have to be a certified teacher. We've talked about probationary. And then there's the proficiency evaluation. So with the proficiency evaluation, you have to be enrolled in a GT certification program. The university or college has the flexibility to use experience or classes in other areas towards usually that 12 hours that I was talking about earlier. And then it's a 1-year certification that can be renewed for another year. So those are some other pathways that people can be the GT teacher. So whenever there's a new person that comes on to the kind of onto my radar, so to speak. And Shasta, can y'all still see my?
No, I was getting ready to interrupt you there, Kathy, and say we cannot see your PowerPoint, your slides anymore.
I don't know
they
what happened
disappeared
there.
From my screen, so I can't put them for everyone else.
Right. So let me just, I'm not sure what I did there. I must have inadvertently moved that. No, don't want to do that. Let me try again. I don't want to start from the beginning. I'll start from here. Sorry, everybody. Let me just try that again. Okay. Can you see that about how to check credentials?
Not yet. At least I
Okay.
can't on my screen, so I'm assuming everyone else can't either.
Okay. I'll give it a second to come up. Make sure that I have shared that with you guys. Are you still not seeing it?
No, ma'am.
Okay, close and try again. Are you seeing it now?
Oh, it looks like it's working on it. Yes, ma'am, I do
Okay.
see it.
Apologize for that. I must have closed something by mistake. My bad. Okay. So
Hang on, let me check. If somebody could just let me know in the chat box that you are seeing it. Just anybody send me a message there so I know that we are seeing it. I don't want us to move on if people can't see.
And Shasta, do I need to back up and so people can see those other slides?
Potentially. Right now we're looking at how to check credentials.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we lost you at the last screen, so maybe go back just in case.
So was that the other pathways for GT certification?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So again, just very quickly, if you don't have the GT certification or there's no one in your district that has GT certification, there's some other pathways to hire someone. Again, that would be emergency certification. That's someone who's a certified teacher. That's usually for 1 year. It's usually only good for the district that you're working in. There's probationary that we've gone over before. And then there's also this other one called proficiency evaluation, where you can be enrolled as a GT in a GT certification program. The university or college that you're admitted to can use experience in your class or in an area, maybe towards those 12 hours of usually this master's program type of endorsement. And then it's usually good for a 1 year that can be renewed up to another year is this proficiency evaluation certification. So as I was saying before, whenever a new person comes into the program and I know that this is a new person either for the GT coordinator position or for the GT teacher position, I go and check at EPSB to see about a person's credentials. So this is, if you want to just go and check, this is what I do. You go to the EPSB web page. On the EPSB web page, there's a little kind of some titles at the top, and you just click How Do I? And then from How Do I, a drop down menu will come up, and then you'll click Check Educator Credentials. Then from there, a page comes up that you see there on the right hand side of your screen. You type in your name, you click Enter or Search. Sometimes it may come up with several people. You'll have to click on the right person, and then you want to check those credentials. And so what I'm looking for is, that endorsement for teaching gifted education for the teacher. If that's not there, then I'm looking for one of these other types of certifications, an emergency certification for teaching gifted, a probationary, certification for teaching gifted, or this proficiency evaluation, or lifetime certification. I'm looking for one of those types of credentials on your EPSB website. And then, of course, the same thing for GT coordinator. I'm looking for supervisor of instruction or superintendent, or for the gifted certification. So be sure and check that and make sure that that's up to date. I'll try to give everybody a week or so to make sure that you've got the right endorsement going on before I reach out to you about if I have any questions about that. Okay. Also, if you've got any questions about how to about certification, you can contact the Division of Education Certification and Preparation. That's definitely not my wheelhouse. Something I've kind of become more familiar with over the 8 years I've been at KDE, but you can contact them there. Okay. So I've talked quite a bit. Do we have any questions? Any questions about certification?
We had one question, Kathy, that I can see here so far. Are there, I think there's just maybe some clarification. Are there additional certification for GT coordinators?
Not that I know of. And maybe they could clarify that question a little bit. I'm not definitely sure what they mean by that.
Okay.
I mean, in order to be the gifted coordinator, you've got to have those 3 different components. You've got to have the gifted education endorsement, 3 years of teaching experience, and your master's or fifth year experience or 5th year certification. That's how you get the gifted coordinator certification. So I'll go on then, Shasta, unless we've got any other questions. Do you see any other questions?
I'm not seeing any.
Okay. All right. Okay. Well, then we'll go on then and talk a little bit about the gifted regulation. All right, the gifted regulation is 704 KAR 3:285, and this may be something that you know a lot about. It may not be something that you don't know very well about. So just over in the Q&A, if you would, just from 1 to 5, 1 being low and 5 being high, what do you feel like is your knowledge of the gifted regulation? Just to kind of get a gauge of, where people are about that. So again, the question is, what is your level of knowledge about the gifted regulation? 1 is low, 5 is high. Just put that in the Q&A over on the side there. Don't see any answers coming in yet, Shasta. Waiting for some.
So we got 1 here. I got a 2.
Okay. 1 and a 2. Okay. Anybody else? Yeah, I see that 2. So what is your knowledge about gifted regulations?
We have a 4, a 1, a
Okay.
3.
3, okay.
A 3, another 3.
Okay. All right, so it looks like, Shasta, we're on the spectrum here. We're all the way from 1 to 5. Well, let's see if there's anything that you can learn today, or maybe something that might be new for you that you didn't know. All right, so in the gifted regulation, there's an introduction, or kind of an introductory paragraph. We'll look at that. And then there are 10 different sections that we'll cover, kind of give a broad overview. And on the GT Resources webpage, if you want to go more in depth about this, a year ago I did 4 modules on the gifted regulation and some other things in a new GT coordinator and teacher webinar. So there's some more information there, but I'm just going to kind of give an overview, some overviews, just kind of some big ideas and important things. I'm just going to try to hit the highlights today. All right. So in the first kind of introductory paragraph, the important idea there is it's saying that the GT students are a category of exceptional students. So this means that in the different special education in IDEA, there are about 15 or so, maybe more categories of exceptional students, and GT is listed as one of those. However, in our state, we also have a separate regulation from the special education regulation. So in our state, we're not under IDEA. We're a separate program in the state of Kentucky. Now, there's some other states where gifted programs come underneath IDEA, like Colorado, but that's not the case in Kentucky. And so therefore, we don't receive IDEA funds either. We receive general funds from the General Assembly. We receive state funds from the General Assembly. And then also it says in that introductory paragraph that all districts must have a gifted program for grades K through 12. In our state, we have 5 gifted categories. This is not the case in some of the other states across our great nation. We have creativity, we have general intellectual ability, which I'll refer to as GIA at times, or GI. We have leadership. We have specific academic aptitude, which is broken down into 4 subcategories of math, ELA, or English Language Arts, science, and social studies. We also have visual and performing arts, and those are broken down into 4 subcategories of art, dance, drama, and music. And music is also divided into vocal music as well as instrumental music. So those are the 5 different categories that we have in our state. All right. Sections 1 and 2. So in section 1, one of the kind of the main idea there is that it has definitions. And these are the definitions that are covered in the other sections, 2 through 10 in the gifted regulation. And it goes all the way from acceleration to visual and performing arts. Some of the definitions that can be a little confusing to people, which maybe at some point we can give some clarification on or clarify those better at some point, is number 3, which is cluster group. So cluster group is where the general education teacher with training about the needs and abilities of gifted students are going to provide to a cluster group of students in her classroom those services that are needed. That's what that's talking about in that particular definition. And so in cluster grouping, this will be decided usually by the building administrator or the principal. Say you have a fourth grade classroom and there's 4 different teachers teaching in that building and for 4th grade. So you might have 12 gifted students, and you might divide those 12 students up among those 4th grade classrooms. You might put 3 in each class, or you might put 6 in one teacher's classroom and 6 in another, and those teachers would be the service provider for those children for some of the services that you would offer them, because of course you're going to have more than one. You have to have a minimum of 2. So that's what that's talking about as far as cluster grouping. And that's a good way to go for services, especially if you only have one person in your district hired as a GT teacher. Then if you have trained other teachers how to provide services, cluster grouping is a really good way to help administer services for students in a district. Also, collaborative teaching sometimes has some questions about it. So collaborative teaching means where the GT teacher goes in and provides services to a cluster group of students with the general education teacher. Number 17 lays out, who should be in that GT selection and placement committee. Be good for you to take a look at that. Also, 19 talks about high potential learners. Those are our primary talent pool students. It talks about what that is, and also talks about that there needs to be a 25th quartile or percentile of students that are selected in a district and at a school. It's kind of what I would be looking at, making sure that each school has about 25% of students selected for primary talent pool, because that's going to be your your pool from which you're going to draw your formally selected students at some point, right? And so you want to be casting that wide net. And maybe the reason that 25% is there is I think that the people who started the regulation many years ago was looking at those 5 different categories and thinking there would be 5% of students in each one of those categories. That's why they say 25% are a quartile. And then number 33 talks about underachieving students. So these are your students who are really bright, but there's a discrepancy between the work that you see or maybe the assessments that you see and what they could possibly be doing. So look at that definition as well. But like I said, there's about 34 definitions there, and it covers the different terms that are in the rest of the regulation. Section 2 is really short, really short, and it just talks about policies and procedures. It says that they need to be available for public inspection. So I would suggest you put those on your web page along with who to contact on your web page. Have a gifted department on your web page. That will really help out parents and others. Also, the policies and procedures have to be locally board approved. So if you have an acceleration policy that you want to put into place, that would need to be board approved. Any of the policies and procedures have to be board approved. And then these procedures need to address, each requirement that's in the regulation. So if you've got a policy about acceleration, then you need procedures. How is that going to work? Do teachers and parents submit a referral in writing, and then after they've done that, then you're going to assess that student based on maybe the Iowa rating scale or some other diagnostic assessment. How is that going to be done? You need to have procedures for the different policies in your in the regulation. Okay. Section 3, let me just catch up here with my notes here. Section 3 is mostly about identification and screening. So districts have to have a system for selecting and identifying students. This means you need to have an informal selection process for primary talent pool. Some people also look at, diagnostic scores from, the Brigance and MAP and STAR, those types of things. But you can't use those scores to keep a student out of primary talent pool, because you don't want to just look at that one data point. You want to look at, you have to have at least 3 evidences for your primary talent pool student. And the same thing for grades 4 through 12. Now these students can be formally and informally, identified depending on the category. And of course you want to look at the overall student. You don't want to look just at the data score or the data point. Now of course for some of the areas you're looking at a 9th Stanine score, unless you're considering those special considerations or exceptions that we'll talk about in section 4 coming up. Also, you need to have a diagnostic screening process for, screening all the students, in your district. That may be a little different this year, but those would be, district decisions about how you go about, doing that this year. There needs to be a procedure to obtain parent input when you go to assign services to students, and it's really important that when you send out that form, that you collect that form and that you talk about the things with your gifted and talented placement committee. I know sometimes that can be hard to get that information back from parents, so you may want to follow up with a phone call or email and say, hey, I really want your input on your child so that we can, offer the appropriate services for your student. So it's really important to follow up and get that information back so that it can be discussed at the GT Selection and Placement Committee. Also, parents need to be notified of their student services annually through the Gifted Student Service Plan. We used to recommend that be done at least by the end of October. Since we're starting school a little bit later, that can be adjusted, and that would be a district decision when you get that out. But annually, they have to be notified of their GSSP. Okay. Section 4 is the procedure for determining eligibility for services. So, of course, if you're looking for how to appropriately offer services to students, you want to do some data gathering, and you want to make sure that you are doing that continually, that you're looking for talent, continually, grades K through 12. It shouldn't be just done, a one and done type thing. You can use local or national norms to identify students. For more information about local norms and how to do that, look on the GT Resources webpage. We also have a local norms calculator there. This is a really good way to ensure that there is equity in your schools when you use local norms. Local norms are based on, the students in that particular building. And you can either do it by school, or you may want to break it down and maybe do it by, an underrepresented population. Maybe look at your free and reduced population. Oftentimes, though, if you just use local norms and you just do it based on your whole district, you really won't find any more students. It's probably usually best used like at the school level is where you look at local norms. And you can, ask a provider that looks at your norms to break those down for you by school. Or like I said before, you can look at our resource page and use the calculator for local norms. The GT Selection and Placement Committee is the person who's going to look at all the different evidences for students and determine whether or not they're selected or identified, and then also their placement. And then there's also, a subsection there in section 4 about special considerations. And we have some guidance on our GT Resources webpage about that. And these are the students that are really bright, still your critical thinkers. Maybe they are very creative, but you're going to apply some exceptions to the regulations here. And the regulations talks about that there may be disabling conditions which mask their abilities. And these disabling conditions can be environmental, they can be cultural. The regulation mentions 3 subpopulations of underrepresented students there in the regulation. It mentions specifically students with IEPs, disadvantaged students, or underachieving students. This is a form that you might want to use in your district. You can find this in the coordinator handbook that helps you document how special considerations were used for a student in your district if you decided that there were some exceptions being made there because their gifts were being masked by these different factors that you can see on this sheet. And this would be placed in the student's GT folder. Well, I have talked an awful lot, Shasta, so I'm going to stop and see if we've got any questions. Any questions about services or identification, anything like that?
I'm checking through here just to make sure I didn't miss anything.
Okay.
We did get some clarification from the previous question. Besides the criteria for a GT coordinator, do you need a certification to be a GT coordinator?
Yes. So I talked about those certifications that are needed. So in order to have the GT coordinator certification, you have to have your GT endorsement. Along with that endorsement, you have to have 3 years of teaching. When I asked EPSB, they thought that meant 3 years of teaching, GT students. And then you have to have your master's or 5th year program certification. And then you apply for that GT coordinator, certification through EPSB. If you don't have that, then you can either have the superintendent certification or you can have the supervisor of instruction certification. That's not to be confused with instructional leadership. You can't have instructional leadership. I mean, you can have it, but that will not, you can't be appointed in that role if that's all that you have, because that's a building level certification, whereas the other 2 are district-wide program, have that ability to oversee districts program-wide. So I hope that answers that question.
Okay, and then I do just want to remind everybody while we're all kind of listening in here that I still have a few people who are showing up as anonymous on my screen, and you may be totally fine with that. But just keep in mind that if you want ELA credit or attendance credit, you will have to make sure that you are logged in as yourself. I just didn't want anybody to miss, credit that they were seeking or hoping for because they are logged in as anonymous.
Right. Because as I said before, I'll be looking at the report that comes from the Microsoft Teams that gives the time that you logged in and logged out. I'll need for that name to be on that sheet as well as the form. And you might want to drop that form in there now, again, Shasta, for people to complete. So I'm looking at, 2 different things there just to verify that you participated today. So you might want to drop that form again into the Q&A box there for people to complete.
I will open that up and send that back out to everybody.
Okay. All right. Okay. All right. Well, I'm going to go ahead, if there aren't any questions about the first 4 sections, I'm going to go ahead and talk about the other sections in the gifted regulation, just try to give an overview of that. So the section 5 has to do with the program evaluation, and this is something the district needs to do annually. You'll be looking at overall student progress and student, parent, and faculty attitudes. Some people sit down to digital surveys, some people do a paper pencil survey, some people do both. You're looking at community involvement. So you're looking at how your GT students are involved in the community and vice versa, how the community is involved in your GT program. You'll be looking at and kind of doing an analysis of your cost effectiveness, how the gifted education program is a part of your regular school program. You'll be looking at the overall quality of instruction and program of your personnel credentials, and then, a future program directions and modifications. And usually what people do is they will do an analysis of all these different types of things, and they usually present them to their board to talk about, this is what we're doing in our program. These are some things that we'd like to maybe improve upon. They definitely usually have, some sort of they talk about it with their GT selection and placement committee, but it's a good time to look at all these different components and make some decisions for, the future educational year. Data that you're going to collect in your annual program evaluation, it must be used in your district instructional planning process. So with your CDIPs and CSIPs, this should be, an agenda item that's talked about during these instructional process meetings. And also, this is the section that talks about that progress has to be reported as it relates to the Gifted Student Service Plan to parents, usually at the end of each semester. So that's where this comes into play. Section 6 talks about service delivery options. So the main ideas here are that all students that are selected or identified have to have a minimum of 2 service options. So that means if you've identified, a student in math and language arts, that you have to have 2 service options for that student for math and 2 service options for that student in reading and language arts. Services need to meet those students' interests, needs, and abilities. So you may have a student that maybe is, really interested in math, but they're also, or they meet the criteria for being identified in math, but maybe they, are really interested in robotics. And if you've got some sort of robotics program, that would be a really good, service delivery option, is maybe an extracurricular offering in that, or a seminar in robotics. I mean, there's so many different ways to meet students' needs. And, with the COVID this year, we really need to be thinking outside the box about how we can serve students. Services need to be offered during the regular school day, except for, like I said, academic competitions or extracurricular activities. But you can't be looking to those after-school programs and those extracurricular things for everything. Something needs to be offered during the regular school day. There are many different types of services that are listed in the regulation. It can be acceleration, either full grade, or it can be acceleration within a subject area. It can be an acceleration within a unit. That's why pre-assessment is so important. When you pre-assess a student, you say, oh, they know all this, they've mastered all the standards in this particular unit. There's no sense in that student sitting there and having to listen and wait for something new. You can compact that curriculum for that student and, let them work on an enrichment project. There's so many different ways of, accelerating a student. There's advanced placement and honors. Some of those courses can be offered by maybe a GT certified person, but maybe the GT certified person isn't certified to offer that. So not all services that are listed here are going to be offered by your GT resource person. There's collaborative and teaching and consultation services. Those, of course, can be offered by your GT resource teacher. Special counseling services, that's probably going to be a collaborative process between the GT teacher and the counselor in your school or district. Differentiated study experiences for individuals and cluster groups in the regular classroom. So those are services that may be offered, by the GT teacher and the regular classroom teacher. Distance learning, that may be something that's offered by a college or university, or it may be offered at the high school. Enrichment services during the school day that are not extracurricular. Those can be offered by, someone in your staff, or, maybe someone a parent or someone who's been gone through the procedures to work with students in your building. Independent studies that are done, by students according to their interest or their, needs. Mentorships, these can be offered, by people out from the community, or they could be high school students working with, middle school students that maybe are in the same area. Resource services delivered in a pull-out classroom or other appropriate instructional setting. This is something we may want to be careful about this coming school year because of contact tracing and not wanting to expose children or staff to more of the COVID germs than necessary. So you may want to, think about that differently. It might be a pull out in a virtual sense, where you're meeting with students maybe through Zoom or another virtual platform, but you're meeting with those students, at different times during the school week in kind of a pull out setting maybe, so that you're not actually, going in and working with those students. Seminars, different types of seminars on different types of things can be offered. I know when I taught, I did one on aviation for some of my general intellectual ability students who are really interested in flight, travel study options. Those may not be, maybe an option this year unless they're virtual because of COVID-19. And then special schools or self-contained classes, and these can only be offered in grades 4 through 12 for students. I know there's several districts around our state that have, special schools for their gifted students. So many different ways to offer services, and I think it's important too that parents know that there are lots of different service options for students, that it's not just about pull out. I know sometimes parents, when their students get to be in middle school and high school, they think that services have stopped because you're not pulling them out anymore. And I think it's really good to have those meetings at the beginning of the year to say, to parents, either in parent-teacher meetings or in, first of the year meetings to say, hey, we may not be doing pull out this year, but these are the services that we're going to be offering to your students this year, so that they're aware of that there are different service options that can be offered. All right, let's look at sections 7 and 8. So sections 7 and 8 have to do with curriculum and personnel. So with curriculum, it's saying that the curriculum has to be either differentiated, supplemented, modified, or replaced, and the curriculum needs to meet the students' needs and abilities and interests. As far as section 8, it talks about personnel. We've kind of covered that in some detail, that the district has to hire a GT certified person to provide direct services to students. As we talked about before, the GT teacher may not have that base certificate to give all the services to all the students, so you're going to have to be working with the other personnel in your district to help offer those services. Staff must be GT certified when they're working directly with students, in addition to the regularly assigned classroom teacher, especially if they're working only with GT students for a half day or more. All the other personnel who work with GT students have to be prepared through professional development to address the needs and interests and abilities of identified students. So when we're talking about other personnel, we're not just talking about the GT staff that are already certified. They need professional development, but the other staff in your buildings who work with your GT students also need professional development. It can be on the social emotional needs of gifted students. It can be about how to identify students, especially, using special considerations. I don't think that's something that we talk about probably enough of in our districts. That is about special considerations. I know when I've gone out to monitor and I've talked with staff about, have you had any professional learning about special considerations, and they just kind of look at me like with the, deer in the headlights type of thing. They've never heard of that before. So I think that's something, in this day and time with equity and wanting to make sure that we're offering services to all of our students, that we talk about special considerations and also consider local norms. Section 9 has to do with budgets and fundings. So state funds have to be used for direct services to students. 75% of that state fund has to be used to hire the personnel. The district has to designate a gifted education coordinator. So this is just one person in your district. I know sometimes I'll see 2 or 3 people are sent to me through an email. It needs to, the superintendent needs to just appoint just one person. If you want to have other contacts at your buildings or whatever, that's fine. They can work in collaboration with the GT coordinator. Sometimes they're called GT coordinators, but for me, there's just one GT coordinator, and that's the person that I email. So just wanted to kind of clarify on that. And then state funding, you know, that money that is appropriated each year is contingent upon employing GT certified staff. We talked about the different ways that you can do that. Submission of the end of year reports and that summative evaluation that we'll talk about some more as the end of the year approaches, and also complying with the gifted regulation. So ensuring that you're doing all the different things that states in the regulation in order to receive your funding. Section 10 talks about procedural safeguards. And so this has to do with that grievance process regarding services. So usually this is a process you have in place in case a parent reaches out to you and says, hey, I don't think my PTP primary talent pool student is receiving services. Or you have a parent that says, I don't think the services that are being offered to my student are appropriate. This procedure is going to address the second bullet here, how and whom the grievance is started, the process for determining the need to evaluate or reevaluate the student, the criteria for determining if placement needs revision, and procedures for ensuring services are provided to all the identified students. And then the procedure has to involve all of the different people listed here, the parents and the guardians, regular education teacher of the student, the GT teacher or the coordinator, administrator and a counselor in addressing the grievance. So that the process has to, move through all of these different people, involve all of these different people that are listed in section 10. So again, I feel like I've talked quite a bit. I'll just pause here for a second to see if you've got any questions about, program evaluation or service delivery options, any of those different things, curriculum, personnel. So I'll just stop here and take a few questions if anybody's got any.
Looks like, Kathy, we had a couple of questions. The first one, you can see in the chat there, can consultation services alone count as a service option?
Yes, that could be a service option. That would be one. So you need to have another one. There has to be a minimum of 2. So consultation could be provided. Yes.
Okay. Great. And then the next question was, can extracurricular activities after school be used as a service option if the student chooses and is able to participate?
Yes, that could be a service option, but that shouldn't be the only one. Like I said before, you need to be offering something during the regular school day as well. And and that question kind of makes me think, well, should you be offering that if the child can't participate because of transportation? You have to be thinking about those students' needs. And to me, that would be a need. That the student's going to need transportation, and if they can't come, then maybe you should offer something else. Just a thought. That would be a district decision. Those are just my thoughts as I'm thinking about that question. Shasta, do we have any other questions?
I'm not seeing any new ones coming in other than those 2.
Okay. All right. Well, those are good questions to clarify on. So we'll go ahead and we'll talk then about the Gifted Coordinator Sample Handbook. So several years ago, there were some veteran GT coordinators and teachers who came together on a work group, and kind of under the request of the Gifted Advisory Council to put together kind of a handbook for people who were new to the program. And they compiled all their different forms and thought about things that a new person would need getting started. And this is how this handbook has come along. And I try to keep it updated with some of the different forms and the assessments that are suggested in the back of the handbook. So this is what the handbook, kind of a screenshot of the table of contents there. As you can see, there are many different types of forms there. It has kind of a calendar of events, that tells you, well, this is probably what you should be doing, the beginning of the year, and this is probably what you're going to be doing towards the end of the semester, those different types of things. It has a lot of different forms in there. There are referral forms for the different categories. There are checklists in there for the different categories and for primary talent pool. There is a table there that gives you the characteristics of a gifted student, and there's some assessment suggestions for each area in the back of the handbook. There's also a parent input form. As I mentioned earlier, sometimes when I go out to monitor and you're looking for that input form, you don't see it in the students folder. And I'm looking, and then I'll ask about that process. So what is your process? And some people do it, digitally through Google Forms or a SurveyMonkey or whatever. You just have to be careful, whatever digital form that you're using, that you have a secure place where those are located in your district. Sometimes Google Forms can be, hacked into. So very important to think about privacy, where those forms are stored, or to maybe, not use a student's name, but maybe use a social security number or some other identifier rather than using the student's name. But very important to get that input back from parents about services. As many of you probably know, when you have a student that's identified or being looked at, referred for special education, the students, parents sit on the ARC. Well, we don't have that process in GT. This is why the parent input form is so important. We don't have the parent that sits on the GT Selection and Placement Committee. That's not one of the people listed in number 17. So that's why it's important to get this input back from parents. All right, I'll just stop and take any other questions or comments that anybody has. Are you seeing any comments or questions there?
Not seeing anything new on my end.
Okay. All right. Well, maybe I'll just ask a question then. So what are some ways that, people get parent input for services in your district? If you could just put that in the, question and answer box there, that might help us know, how people are doing that. Do y'all do it through a survey, or how do y'all go about collecting input from parents? I've seen some really good digital forms over the past several years. Just wondering, do you know how your district does that? Are you getting any feedback from that, Shasta?
Not yet. People may be typing, or there may be a little pause here in my connection. So we'll give them another second or two to make sure.
Okay, right. Sounds good. I'm also looking down through the different things here. Appreciate that people have signed in with their name. That's really important, again, to sign in with your name. If you didn't do that, you can leave and come back and sign in as your name. Okay. All right, we got some really quiet people here today, Shasta. They're not talking.
Here we go. Here's a couple of things. I'm sorry, that just came in here.
Oh, I know it takes
one
a while.
Person. It does. There's like a delay. Some really good responses here. Our district sends home a paper copy for parents to fill out. Another response is, what documents should be in each student's gifted folder? It's a question.
Yes, and you will find those in the GT Coordinator Sample Handbook. That is one of the things that's listed in there. So I don't want to leave anything out, but some of the things that need to be in there, such as be the gifted student service plan, progress reports, the documentation evidence that was used to identify or select the student. There need to be at least 3 in there. And I usually will go and look at Infinite Campus and see what was checked in Infinite Campus to see what needs to be in the folder. So those need to be in there. Those are just some of the samples of things that need to be in the gifted students, gifted and talented students folder. But I think there's some other things, and maybe some other things that are also listed in the GT Coordinator Sample Handbook, but that's a good question.
Okay. We also have some people who said that they have a PDF that they send to parents, paperwork sent home with a questionnaire, new plan being formulated for this year with new challenges.
Yeah.
We have a survey sent home by the student for their parent to complete, thinking this year they're going to move to a digital form. And a survey in Google Forms for students, parents, and teachers. Questions were specific for each group. We got good feedback to help us in planning.
Well, that's good. And I think, with this digital age that we're living in, also with the pandemic, we may have to move to more, forms and things that are digital. And I think that that's a good idea. Anything else, Shasta?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I'm not seeing anything new right now.
Okay. All right. Let's go ahead then and we'll talk about Infinite Campus. All right, so Infinite Campus is, of course, our student information system where we keep all of our information. And here are some things as a new person or as a veteran person that you might need to have rights to. So those rights and permissions are obtained not from me. I can't give those to you, sorry. Those are given to you by your case's contact, sometimes better known as the District Technology Administrator or Coordinator, DTC. You'll need rights to the GT Participation Tool. So we no longer have a tab in Infinite Campus. It is moved over underneath the System Administration tab, I believe, or the System tab or Index tab, yeah. And so you'll need rights for that in order to enter records. You'll need some reports. You'll need access to these state reports. There is an invalid start date, year-end cleanup report. There's a validation roster for state testing report. There's an invalid gifted category report. I don't know that we really use that one maybe as much as we did several years ago. That's for, usually a student who's in grades K through 3, but they were entered for like language arts or for music, that type of thing, when it really should just be for primary talent pool. It'll list those students about, that their record's not correct. There's also invalid primary talent pool. And this is, students who are in grades 4 through 12 who are still don't have an end date on their primary talent pool record. That's what that's going to pull for you. And you can really save yourself a lot of trouble if you'll follow the data standards and you'll pre-calculate when that student will be in 3rd grade and go ahead when you enter that record, put that end date on that record. It won't, complicate anything in Infinite Campus if you go and you should go ahead and end date that record when you're entering the student for the first time, and that will solve a lot of problems. Also, there's a student invalid specific academic aptitude, and I think I left off one for invalid specific general intellectual ability. And these will be students who, for some reason, it's pulling those because it's not seeing that the 9 stay-nines clicked. It's not seeing that the special considerations box has been clicked. It's looking for, one of the 2 things there. And I just realized that Infinite Campus has updated some things in the data standard, and I'm hoping to send out an email about some things that have changed there. So it's really important that you follow the data standard. And I tried to send you the most updated one. I have to, that's a very fluid document, and I have to update it every time Infinite Campus updates something for us in our data standard, and we'll talk about that a little bit more too. Also, you need to have rights to the Kentucky State Reporting QA Gifted and Talented Report. That's where that's located, is under Kentucky State Reporting. And this QA Gifted and Talented Report has replaced 2 other reports that we used to have. It's replaced the GT Detail Report, and it's also replaced the Opportunity Access Report. So it's kind of a combination of those 2 reports, and it will give you a lot of good data about the schools and the students in your district. There's also, you need system admin rights if you want to be able to publish the Gifted Student Service Plan and Gifted and Progress Report to the parent portal. I don't know that your case's contact will give you those rights, but they have the right to do that. You can work with them once you've created, you know, the Gifted Student Service Plan and Progress Report. And let's just talk a little bit about data standards. So data standards, this is the Bible, kind of, sort of, for how to enter things and how to do different things in Infinite Campus. This tells you how to enter, GT records, be they new students in the system, or you're just adding an area of identification for a student. It talks about, what to do if I send you an email about missing records and evidence, what to do about that. It talks about how to create a Gifted Student Service Plan, how to create a progress report. It also talks about how to publish forms to the parent portal. It talks about, what to do if you're going to use local norms. That's a new checkbox that's in on the student entry page there. And also military, if you've got children who come over from the military, come to your district and they're military, families, we have to, by a compact, we have to automatically accept those students. So it talks about that in that particular section. Some really good things to know in the data standards there. And I'm not going to go into all of that. I think I'll save that for a separate webinar. That would take a lot more time than we have today. And I'm sure that your ears are probably getting tired anyway. All right, let's talk about missing records. So, missing records. Unfortunately, GT records, special ed records, EL records, they do not automatically transfer with a student. When a new student comes into your district and they're there with their parent or whatever, the enrollment personnel get a notification into their system that they have a new student. And all of those records come over with those students as links on a separate page when they click on the student's SSID number or however it comes over. I don't have access to that, so I don't know exactly what that sees. And so when those records come over, they need to also check and look underneath the Kentucky import wizard. That's where the GT record's located. And in that data standard that I talked about earlier, it talks about how to import those records. So really important to familiarize yourself with that, because when that's missed, then I get a weekly report that tells me of all the students that have been not imported by the school system. And so then I have to contact you to let you know that those students' records haven't been imported. So really important to, have some sort of process or training with the enrollment personnel in your district about GT records and how to import them. Maybe create a little PowerPoint slide that you do a Google Meet or Zoom meeting with them, or however you want to do that. But really important that they know that those records don't come over automatically. Also, there's what I call the broken chain. And I always think about Aretha Franklin whenever I think of broken chain, So with the broken chain, this is what happens. Give you an example. Okay, let's just say Kathy was identified in Shelby County for music. And then after a year or so, Kathy's family moved to Jefferson County Public Schools. Well, for some reason, Jefferson County doesn't import my record. Maybe I wasn't there very long. Maybe I'm a really transient student. Maybe I'm only there, for whatever reason. Sometimes it's because they're going to maybe, a special place for students like My Lady of Peace or whatever, and I'm not there for maybe a couple of days. to get some special counseling services or whatever. And JCPS, maybe they didn't know, that I was there. Well, then, Kathy then moves to Oldham County. And because JCPS didn't import my records, Oldham County can't import my records. So there's that broken link in the chain. And when that happens, you'll need to contact me because I can see where children have been, all their enrollment records, because you may have to manually enter their record because you won't be able to import it since that other district didn't import it. So that's really important to know. And your enrollment personnel need to know that. And it's just really important to create a process to ensure that, students' records are being imported. And as I said before, a training with enrollment staff. All right. So I think I've covered all these different things. Contact me if you're not sure what's going on. If you can't see where the student was before they came to your district, and I'll try to help you with that. And when you have a new student, of course, you may have to change their services because whatever services were offered in the previous district, you may not be offering those in your district, or you may need to change them, Also, just don't forget about the missing data and information on the record. And usually the missing information is they're missing that 9th stay 9. And that may be because they were selected for, special considerations, but you didn't enter that information correctly in Infinite Campus. All right, so Shasta, I feel like I have talked again for a long time. I'll just stop and pause for questions, see if anybody's got any questions.
Yeah, we had one, and I think it reflects back on the parent engagement and involvement piece. The question was, would you suggest sending the parent input form out once a year?
Yes, I think that would be a really good idea. I would especially send it out probably in those transition years from elementary to middle and then middle to high, because usually those services are going to change then. You may have some of the same services, in elementary and middle, elementary, but then when you get to middle, they may change, So definitely, I think it would be important to gather that information if you can. Once a year would be great. Would be great. Any other questions?
Not that I can see at the moment. I'm going to refresh here just to make sure.
Okay.
Okay. Nothing's popping up right now.
Okay. All right. Well, if you have any questions and you feel like, maybe you've got questions that are just more, a one-on-one question, feel free to shoot me an email. I'll try to answer those in a timely fashion. All right, let's talk a little bit about funding, talk about the money. All right, so funding. All right, so each year funding is usually posted around the 1st of October. And like I said before, districts receive a grant from the state. This shouldn't be the end-all be-all of, the funds that go to your GT program, but they may be just because funds are very tight, But I know that there are many districts who also give more funds to GT from other places in their district, that type of thing, to support their district. And just remember that funds are regulated by the General Assembly. They're not regulated by KDE. If I could, wave my wand and give you more money, I would, but I can't do that. Those funds are regulated by the General Assembly. So it's important for, people to reach out to their congressperson, their representative, about funding for gifted and talented. That's not something I can do, unfortunately. The funding formula is based on a tiered system of your general student population. It's not based on the number of GT students that you have in your district. It's kind of one of those things where it's based, like you may get maybe $11,000 or $10,000 if you've got students, 0 to 10,000 students, you may get $10,000. I don't remember exactly. I have to go back and look at the funding formula. And then if you have, 11,000 to 20,000 students, you may get $20,000, that type of thing. But it's a tiered system. That's how the money is appropriated. Currently, the GT program receives about $6.2 million. And when you think about, spreading that among all the different districts we've got, that's how that goes. All right. So in order to receive your grant, you have to make sure that you're in compliance with the gifted regulation. So that means, you need to have a GT teacher that's certified in teaching in your district, or you may have several that you're going to take those funds and divide them among. You've got to have a GT coordinator that's correctly certified. You need to be having services in place for students. I mean, all the different things that we covered earlier in the presentation. There's a state funding matrix that lists the allowable expenses, and I sent that handout to you guys, and we'll look at a screenshot here in just a second. And then there's also a grant for each district, and that's posted on the state grant webpage. And if I can remember, I'll go back and put that link here on this particular slide. But if you just go to the KDE website and you type in state grant, it'll take you to that page, and you can see what the grant has been in past years. I don't know that it's been posted yet for this year. I don't think it has. This is what the non-competitive funding matrix looks like, and you can see here in column E that this will tell you whether or not you can use the different codes here for the different expenditures. Like, for example, here, code 0100 certified substitute, you cannot spend GT funds on substitutes. Okay, so it'll give you the information about that. Down here, I think it talks about just overtime and classified, that type of thing. If you have any questions about, whether or not you can spend funds on that, or your financial administrator does, just have them give me a call. Be glad to help you. Okay, so we're almost to the end of our presentation today. Let's talk a little bit about resources and support. All right, so here are some web pages that might be helpful to you this year. The first one is, of course, the KDE Gifted and Talented Resources webpage that I've mentioned. The regulations posted there. There are training presentations from past years that are posted there, along with those videos that I talked about that give more information. There are guidance documents there. I talked about local norms and special considerations documents live there. The data standards are posted there, and there are brochures there. There's a brochure, primary talent pool brochure, as well as a GT brochure that you can print out. The KDE COVID-19 webpage has a lot of good information there. There's one specifically that we posted for exceptional children in preschool that may answer some questions that you have about assessment and how to test students, services, that type of thing. There are news releases there, links to other agency information. Another good web page is the Kentucky Association for Gifted Education, better known as CAGE. This is our advocacy group in the state, and they provide a lot of professional development during the year. And you can join, I think, for about $35. So it's a really, really economical organization to be a part of. Another good web page is the National Association for Gifted Children. Again, this is a national level advocacy group for parents and teachers and GT staff. There are many good articles on diverse populations that you can be a part of. They have webinars that they offer. Lots of good resources there. Hoagie's Gifted Education page is another good GT page. There are many links to resources for students and parents and teachers. There are books that are listed there, different types of curriculum, information about different types of assessments on this webpage. It's just has a whole host of information on this page. Then, of course, we've got Gatton and Craft Academies. You might want to check those out for students as they get older. Some that I didn't list here, another one is the Gifted Guru. The Gifted Guru is Lisa Van Gimmert, and I think it was about last week she had posted some really good ideas about how to think about virtual learning for students and how to plan that for as a teacher, what things that you could think about. And she said, think about the things that you maybe do face-to-face and how could you transfer those for virtual learning or remote learning. So I would check her out. Another one of my favorite websites is Birdseed, Byrdseed. Ian Birdseed is a former GT teacher and has a lot of good ideas for students as well as for staff, teaching staff. Really good web page. So check it out. Another good resource, we have several different, regional support cooperatives across the state, and we've tried to align ourselves as GT staff with some of these different cooperatives across the state. So if you're in the Central Kentucky area region and would like to have a cadre to become a member of and to meet with for support, Leanne Pickrell is the leader for that group, and there is her contact. In the Green River regional area, Jennifer Sheffield is the leader for that group. In Jefferson County Public Schools, Stacy Edelman is the support contact for that group. Kentucky Educational Development Area is Jenny Jenkins. Kentucky Valley Education is Jean Lee in Harlan County. Beth Patrick is the Lake Cumberland Regional Cadre leader there. That's for the Southeast South Central region. There's an N-Cage group that Shannon Gubser is the leader for or facilitator for at this time. Ohio Valley Regional Education Area, that's Janet Frazier. And in the Western Kentucky area is Toddy Adams, and there is her information. And so what we have decided to do this year too is to have like a GT Cadre leader group, and we're going to meet once a month, and they will bring different concerns and ideas kind of to our table once a month, and we'll talk about those. One of the things that came from our first meeting was different questions that their regions had, like about how to assess and screen students this year, how to provide services, and then just some regulation questions. And we talked about those, and we've been working on a frequently asked questions guidance that will hopefully be approved by leadership here at KDE. We have a process that we have to go through, so sometimes it takes a couple of weeks to get things approved before I can send them out to you guys. But if you have some specific questions about that, I'll be glad to, answer those if I can here today, or to send you an email about them. But I just wanted you to know that we are working on some of those questions that you've had about those particular topics. And then these different cadres will be meeting, as groups during the year, so they'll be reaching out to you. And so you'll want to let them know that you'd like to be a part of this group for them to be able to email you about when their meetings will be this coming year. I've also thought about and hope that maybe you might be interested in maybe new GT coordinator and teacher cadre. And this would be a support group for, anyone who would like to join. And maybe we could be able to pair you with a mentor, a veteran GT person that could give you ideas and support during your first year on the job, so to speak. And we could have some training on different topics that you might want some information on. And then, of course, discuss any kind of member questions and share resources. So just to kind of get some feedback on that, if you would, I'm going to ask Shasta to drop the form in there, kind of a survey to let me know, how often you'd like to meet, those types of things. What would be a good day, that kind of thing, whether or not you're interested. So Shasta, if you could drop that form in the box, that would be really helpful.
Alrighty, let me get that open for you, and I'll drop that in there.
Okay. All right. So she's going to drop that in the Q&A box, and if you would, fill that out, and that way I'll know, when you guys want to meet, that type of thing. I'll look at my form here, just kind of see what we've got going on.
Kathy, could you send me the link through our chat, so because for some reason it won't open on the one that you had sent me previously, it won't
Sure.
open up for me because there's
I
no
would be,
reason that I'll get that out.
yeah, I will find that here. Make sure I can share that with you. Okay, let's see if I can put it here. Did you get that, Shasta? I sent it to you. I don't know if I put it in the right chat box. Put it in this chat box here. I put it in like that. I think I put it in a published chat box or something there. But anywho.
Yep, I have it, so I will copy it and put it in there.
Yeah, as I did my presentation yesterday, I had a lot of people that were really interested in this and said that they'd like to meet probably maybe monthly. Fridays might be good, but you know that might not be the consensus. So it would be good to. That's why I'm giving this survey out just to see, you know, who's interested and when would be a good time for most people. So I've got about 8 responses here, and looks like monthly is taking the precedence there. And the day of the week is looking like it's going to be either maybe Monday or Friday. Looks like Friday's winning right now. About half and half on a mentor. Some people say yes, some people say no. So, of course, if you put your name there like I've asked you to, then I'll be able to know who needs what. And then, of course, your email address, I'll need that. Awesome. Okay. Well, we're just about finished for today. Shasta, you might also want to put that form in there, the attendance form in there one more time. And also, there may be some questions, maybe topics I didn't cover that maybe you had a question about. So feel free at this time to just ask any questions that you feel like would be beneficial to the group. I'll be glad to try to answer those. If I don't know the answer, I'll say I don't know the answer, but I will find out and get back to you ASAP. Do we have any questions, Miss Shasta?
I'm not seeing any right now.
Okay. Give you a couple of minutes. I know sometimes if you're like me, you may be worn out with all the information that I have, you know, tried to provide today. So, I'm not saying any questions either, Miss Shasta. I guess I must have done a really good job of covering it all. Oh, me.
I think probably everybody's like you and I, Catherine, we're like Friday brain, which is just spaghetti. So
yes, yes, I totally understand. Totally understand. And I know that you guys have got a lot on your plates. Well, if you think of anything or you need anything from me, here's my contact information. There's my direct line there, 502-892-6560. Or you can always email me at kathy.anderson@education.ky.gov. So again, thank you so much today for joining us today. I hope you learned something new. I hope this was beneficial. I'll just stay on the line for, you know, a few more minutes here in case anybody has any questions that they have that they thought of. Otherwise, make sure that you have, you know, use that form to sign in so that I can compare that to the Microsoft Teams information that I'll be getting from a report that will be released to me after we're finished today. Hope you guys have a great rest of the year or beginning of the year. Get started on the year. Thank you so much for all the things that you're going to be doing for kids this year. You are the boots on the ground. Just my thoughts and prayers will be with you this year. And thank you for all that you're going to do for parents and students and for your faculty. Have a great year.
And Kathy, we did get a question really quickly. It says, for the
Okay.
form just sent out, is this only available for first-year teachers and coordinators?
That's kind of what it's intended for, but it doesn't have to be. It can be for somebody who's, done it for several years and maybe wants a, fresh look at something. So it doesn't have to be, no. That's a good question. It's a good question. So I'll stay on here about another minute, and then Shasta and I will leave the building and leave the platform. Again, thanks again for joining us today. Hope that you guys have a great year.